Assalamualaikum everyone. Good evening to you all. Welcome to the virtual FE learning session on a topic which is really close to our heart, which is the art of effective case writing and the winning formula behind it. Thank you all for joining us. There are basically two parts of the session. Session one will be covered by one of the brand ambassadors of FE, as I may call him, Sheikh Adil Hussain. As you all know, he's the CMO Tapal Tea. He's been in the field of marketing for over 18 years. And one of the most prominent factors in which we identify him is his passion towards marketing and his goal towards bringing new things just about in any form. So Adil, before I hand this over to you, let me also introduce you to Hamza Amjad, who is going to cover the second part of the session. He's the Senior Creative Director, Ogilvy, Pakistan. He is very young and vibrant. With just 13 years of experience in the industry, he aims to continue narrating compelling stories to us all. He's a live inspiration for you all working for agencies out there. He's going to cover the second part of the session. So Adil, over to you. Guys, just one more thing. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat box. Adil is going to take them once the session is complete. And now we're just going to start. Thank you all for joining.
Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. I'm audible, right? Is this okay? Yeah,
so a little louder, I think.
Okay, Afshin, are we gonna start with the poll, or should I just go ahead?
Yes, we can start with the polls.
Sure. So go ahead.
Guys, these are a few polls. We'd like you all to please take a few seconds to fill this out. Very interesting results of the poll.
It's the effectiveness awards, guys.
The most interesting one is how much time do you spend making a show reel? Okay, guys, I think we've got the answers of all the polls. We can share the results. Yeah. Adil, you can.
Yeah, so very interesting. We wanted to just run this exercise before I started off, and it's a very short presentation, guys. So it's more on what the content will be rather than the number of slides. But these questions are very much feeding into it, right? So I'll somehow bring the results back into the presentation as and when they deem fit. Just to comment a little bit on them before we start. So the first one, it seems like everyone or the majority thinks it's the challenge, context, and objectives, which is the most important part. That's interesting. In terms of how much time you spend making a show reel, the majority spend about 3 to 4 days. Okay. We'll comment on that a bit later. How much time on average does a juror spend on an individual case? Interesting. This I can already tell you that it comes down as the day goes on. So that's something that Hamza will also resonate with. On how many parameters is a campaign evaluated? And yeah, okay. So here we could also say it's 4 or more, right? So how many jurors judge a single case? Most of you said 5 to 8. That's about right. Usually there's more. If you count in all the rounds of judging that happen, then it's probably a lot more than that as well. That passes through a lot more pairs of eyes than we're seeing over here. So great. Let's get into the winning formula. That's the title I was assigned, and therefore being the studious person I am, I have to come up with a formula, right? So we're going to go through parts, and then we're going to try and put that into an equation and give you something simple to follow and remember, and therefore crack this case once and for all. What are we going to talk about? As I said, just very few things, but very meaty things. So first up would be category selection, how to choose, and you can't choose unless you know all the details. And I'm, by the way, no expert. I just happen to have had the privilege of sitting in the jury for the past 2 years or so, or 3 years. So I just happen to know a little bit, right? So I can pass on that knowledge to you guys. The second part will be deconstructing the FE form. Again, everything where winning is involved or which is a competition, the way in is to always look at its parts and to deconstruct it. And once you've understood that, then you can find a winning formula, right? That's how it usually works. So we'll attempt to do that. And then from there, we'll see what sort of formula we're coming up with. We'll move on to top tips, but usually those will also get covered while I'm discussing the first 2 parts. And then we'll just sign off in terms of actually putting that equation forward. So let's dive right into it. So choosing your category. Like I said, it's very important to know obviously how many categories you're playing with in order to do so, right? And there are, I don't know if all of you know, but around 30 product or service categories available that you can enter into as the main area for your work, for the amazing work that you've done. And then there are 19 specialty categories. Afshin, you can jump in and correct me if I quote any of these numbers wrong. So I believe these are correct, right? And
yeah, these are.
And there are certain rules in terms of the combination of how you can enter them in, right? And that's where the combination plays a little bit of a role. So let's say a single case, if you have just one case that you want to enter, you can enter it into its main product or service category. And you can also enter it into 1 or 2 or more, if it's applicable, specialty categories, right? So if you are like me, industry, what you're going to do is one of your campaigns is going to go into the hot beverage category for sure, as the main category that it enters, because that's its product. But it can also, if it's applicable, go into a specialty category like media innovation or influencer, and so on and so forth. But obviously it has to make sense. Another thing to remember is if you feel that what you've done is more relevant to a specialty category, and it's not something that you want to enter into the product or service category, you can do that because it's not mandatory. So if you feel you did a very kick-ass influencer campaign as part of a bigger campaign, and you think it holds well on its own, then you can put it into the specialty category only, and it doesn't need to go into your product or service category. So that's something else to keep in mind. The third one, which is a little bit tricky to keep to remember, but it's important, is
Adil,
if you
just a sec. Can you just speak a little louder? There's, we've got someone messaged us on the chat box that they can't hear you properly. You'll have to be a little bit more louder. Are you there?
So sorry, I think I got disconnected. Can you hear me now again?
So we can hear you. It's a little थोड़ी हल्की आवाज मेरे ख्याल से.
Yeah, just checking my connection again.
Yeah.
So
It's better.
Sorry.
It's better.
Yeah. So as I was saying, the last one, which is a bit tricky, is if you've got a new product or service that you've just launched, then this should not be entered into the main product or service category, and it should go into the new launches category, right? And that's one of the specialty categories. It just makes sense, and it increases your chances of winning, and it's just the right categorization. So we won't go into details of the different product and service categories because those are quite a few, and I think FE covers almost all of the ones that are operating very actively in Pakistan. So that's pretty much all encompassing. For the 19 specialty categories, there are quite a few that are very interesting and a few new ones as well. Also some new ones in the product ones, but within the specialty categories, you've got the brand experience ones, you've got the social media ones that have just come in, you've got small budgets as a category that has just come in, where even the players or campaigns that don't have too many budgets can play in and become a part of it. Some of the traditional ones are the ones like David versus Goliath, which is a really good one. The positive change ones are also the traditional ones. You've got the seasonal marketing and the topical marketing ones. And you've got Passion for Pakistan, which is also some of one of the more popular ones from the past years. So I won't be going through all of them, but obviously you can put in a question and we can discuss some of them in more detail slightly later. And I would ask Afsheen's help to expand on specific category definitions as well. But basically, there's a broad spectrum that you can choose from in order to enter correctly the kind of work that you've done, which would help in your chances of winning. I just discussed one example, which is a case in point, and that's the Berger Paints example for the missing children and using truck art as the media to do this. And they entered this in multiple categories, right? They did it in the paints category for sure. They did it in, I think, the positive change for good brands category as well. And they did it in the media innovation category also. And here the case in point is more in terms of why this was actually not such a good idea to enter it into the media innovation category, because the media innovation category is very specific and very strict in its definition of you really have to either create a new media which did not exist before, or do something with a medium which hasn't been done before, right? And in both those points, it sort of failed, because truck art has existed since ages. And by the way, in those regions, it is a form of advertising and it is a form of dispelling information. And therefore, it is a medium that was used for advertising, so to speak. And therefore, it wasn't considered to be a strong case within the media innovation category. I think where it did win, Afsheen, was within its own category and within the positive change category, because you can't argue with the results of finding 9 children through the campaign, right? So obviously that's something which trumps all parameters of effectiveness. There's one other golden rule that you should remember, which is pertinent to this case as well as everything else that we can talk about, is really customizing your forms. And if you're entering multiple categories, this becomes even more important. So if you're entering your product into the specific product category that it's for, it will have a certain different makeup and a different context and a different challenge, and the objectives will be defined as such, and so on and so forth, right? However, if you enter it into a specialty category, everything cannot remain the same. You will have to adapt the context. You will have to specify the challenge even more closely, and you will have to outline the objectives and the results achieved on those certain KPIs, and not all. So it's not a copy-paste job, and that's the biggest mistake that a lot of us do. Okay. Moving on to the second part, which is now the actual makeup of the form itself. And here is where you really start getting into the meat of how you can really crack the case and write it in a way that it has a better chance of winning and impressing judges, right? And the first part here is the challenge or the context and objectives. Really, really important part. And now we can relate back to what you guys said in the poll, where you were saying that this part is actually one of the more important ones. So yeah, that's a good start. Let's build on that. Explaining the landscape and the context in a way that the juror is not from your industry is really important. If we don't understand what context you're operating in, or your business is operating in, or your brand is operating in, we will have less appreciation for the amount of work that you've done or the campaign that you've rolled out, right? The more you explain, or the clearly you explain the context to us, the better we are able to understand and appreciate the actual work that then goes in once you've rolled out the campaign. You really need to outline the objectives very clearly and explain them in a way as to why they are important. So just by saying that we wanted a sales increase of 10% will not work. What will work is why 10% mattered. Because 10% increase in sales was going to give you a 1% increase in market share, because that's how the market was constructed, will give it more importance and more context, and will be a richer way of saying it rather than just saying increase sales by 10%. And why sales is more important, or why increasing the market share is more important, will also help. So just keep asking yourself, why have I stated this, or why am I putting this on the form, and just go down to the lowest common denominator on it. Once you've said that, you also need to outline what tools will be used to measure the objectives. So if you're saying sales, are you doing it in volume? Are you doing it in value? And why? Why is volume more important? So if you're in the beverage business and you think, I have to measure it in kilograms of tea consumed, and that's the important measure, then you explain it that way, because you guys link it back to per capita consumption of tea, in the regions that you operate in. So that's why it will become important, and it will become richer for the juror to read, and really explain the challenge well. And challenges can be all encompassing, or they can be very specific, right? So yes, there might be an overall business challenge that you're weaker in one region of the country, or stronger in another, and therefore you want to grow in that region. Or you're weaker in a certain channel and you want to, grow that channel rather than another channel. So that's maybe an overall business objective that your company runs with. But for your specific brand and for that specific year, you might be honing into a specific challenge, like a certain target segment, or a certain competitor is coming into your territory and trying to do something and take your consumers away. So you're trying to get into that. So really get into the nitty-gritties and explain the context, the challenge, and the objectives very well. And the way to do that is keep asking yourself the why, and keep going down to the last why, as to make it very clear. Something that I probably should have led with is the fact that your sections and the overall case has to obviously read like a story, and you have to make it seem very, very logical to follow each other. And to the layman, it should seem like something very easy to understand. So don't fill it with so many jargons that, it'll take a specialist and a marketing dictionary to be able to decode it. None of the judges are going to get impressed by the use of jargons. We know people who are writing these cases are from the field and they know their stuff. We'd much rather try and understand what the challenge was, what the story was, and go for that. One final note on this before I move on is on the objectives themselves. And here, we're all guilty of retrofitting our results to the objectives and then trying to fit that to the campaign, right? And I won't hide from it in the fact that, maybe I'm guilty of that as well. But you still need to do it in a way that it makes sense, and it needs to be linked and woven into the overall challenge or overall story in a way that nobody can pick it up, or even if they can, which by the way most jurors can, it doesn't offend them. And that's what we're looking for. So we understand that, you're not going to start off a campaign with the objective of winning an FE. you may, but usually that's not the case. And if you're entering the FEs for the first time, you will have a challenge of results and objectives, right? So just be very, very mindful and smart about that and be aware of it. Okay, moving on to the second part, which is insights and strategic idea. There have been so many discussions on this part within the jury groups and sessions as to what is an insight and how good or bad or well they're written or not written in the forms. And I'm not going to attempt to define it, right? And people are looking for those magic definitions of insights. In my 18 years, if you've spent enough time with the consumers, you're hearing from their mouths and in their lingo what they want and what the human truth is for them. So basically, you're looking for an insight which is category specific, which is brand specific, and which is specific to your consumer segment that you're trying to target for that specific problem. The way you're going to make it richer in the form is once you've described it in as simple terms as possible, you're also going to link it to the challenge and to the objective and how your brand is going to be able to solve it, right, and come into it. So that's going to be the main challenge in this section. It will also help if you outline how did you come about the insight. So was it through consumer connects? How many did you do? Did you do a qualitative first and then put it through a quant or not? Did it just come about as a gut feel and then you did some sort of validation on it? And it's fine. If it was more like something that came up during a meeting, that's also okay, right? Insights can come and be inspired from anywhere. But usually some sort of validation helps. And if you did that, explain it. Also then move on within the same section to the creative big idea. And how does that link with the insight and solve the challenge that you would have defined in the section before? So always make sure that there are strong links between the creative idea, the insight, and the challenge that you've already mentioned. And obviously that the objectives are able to measure what you're outlining in these sections. So all of these points really, really important. And we can come back to them in a bit because they're all about the story that you're telling, right? The third section is where I think most of us spend our time erroneously, is bringing the idea to life. Now, it's very easy for me to say that there are just mainly two parts that you're supposed to be focusing on over here, and that's explaining what your creative strategy or communication strategy is going to be or was, and what your media strategy was. And within those two, you're basically talking about all the parts and why are they or why were they so relevant to the challenge that you had outlined and to the target segment that you had outlined. So both of these things are important and you need to explain them in a little bit of detail. The media strategy is consisting of obviously the channels that you're choosing, the day parts that you're choosing, the reach versus frequency trade-off, and all those kinds of things. As well as the overall media mix, right? You can even talk about in terms of what sort of budgets and percentages of the budget are you allocating to each one and why. And same thing on your creative and communication strategy in terms of, again, what did you use more? Did you push ATL more? Did you use BTL in conjunction with it? Was there a bigger IMC to it, or was there only one leg? Was there only a digital leg to it or not? And those are the kinds of things that you need to explain here. And first is listing down the parts and then the reasons why. And the reasons why will again be richer if you've somehow linked them to your target segment, to the challenge, and to the insights. So you'll keep hearing me saying that you have to link it back. And that is probably the most important thing, because there has to be a red thread following through each section. There has to be a story that is unfolding through each section in order for you to make sense to the juror and to make it flow very easily in their minds, and for them to be able to score you highly on this. The fourth section is results, and these are probably left till the end. They're usually an afterthought, and we really don't pay a lot of attention to these results part within the forms. We don't even write down the KPIs again over here, which we had mentioned in the first section. And usually a lot of jurors are scrolling back up because we're scoring these on tabs, and we're scrolling back up to look at the KPIs or objectives that were mentioned above, and then scrolling back down to see whether the same ones have been mentioned below and have the results been put in there in the right context or not. So firstly, put all the KPIs very transparently that you had mentioned in the first section back here, and then put the results in front of them that this is what you achieved on each KPI. Now, just putting them there is not going to be enough. What usually helps a lot, and the best cases have this, is when you explain the results. So why are they important? So again, this would be easy once you've also done the same thing with the KPI in the first section, right? You have already explained to me why objectives were important. Why was measuring a sales increase important in the first section? So now when you did get that 10% or 14% increase, you can A, repeat that, and B, tell me what impact that had on the organization, on the brand because of that achievement. So explaining the results is very important. The impact also is very important. If you can tell me or tell us what the impact of those results was. And one thing that again we forget is stating the factors, the external factors that helped achieve those results. Stating them very clearly also adds context, right? Again, this can be done in the first section, but if you haven't, and then you've overachieved some of the results, it might be great that we think that yes, the campaign has done more than expected or delivered above expectations. But if you tell us that, yeah, the economy helped, or the competition took a price increase, or the competition actually left the market, which left some open space, that'll help us add some credence to it, right? And it will help us add some, again, context to it. And all of this is very important. The context is really, really important in this. Now, linking it back to the first question in the poll, I don't know if this will be a surprise, but, and Afshin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all of these are almost as equally important in terms of the weightage that they're assigned for the scoring. And if one section is slightly higher, that section is the results section. So you've got the challenge, the insights, and the bringing the idea to life at 23.3% of weightage to be exact. And then the results section is a 30% weightage. So if you mess up the results and you did a great job on the first three, you still have a more than a quarter chance that that the case is not going to make it forward. So I cannot stress it enough that we really need to focus on the results in terms of them tying back to the challenge and objectives that you had outlined in the first section. And how did all of these nice things that you wrote in the bringing the idea to life and the insights and creative idea, how are these measured and impacting your business from those as well? Something that I have to note, which I put up on my LinkedIn as well a couple of days ago in preparation for this, was if anyone wanted me to note on something, and the comments that I got was basically on digital. And here it's pertinent to mention that digital KPIs have been a point of discussion for a long time amongst all of us. And so just views and number of likes and these kinds of things, we have to move beyond that, right? So you'll have to look a bit deeper and do a little bit of soul searching, and just number of impressions and these kinds of things cannot be our guiding light for achieving success on digital, and we'll have to get into it a little bit. Having said that, when you get into it and you start throwing in again more jargons like VTRs and CTRs and AERs and those kinds of things, you again need to give a lot of context. Why is watching through rate important? Why is click-through rate important? Why is an average engagement rate of 4% or 10% important, right? And tie it back to, again, the challenge and the context that you had already written up front, and do that. Then the next part to this is also that we actually have very few digital only cases coming in, and we appreciate the volume of those going up. So look at the categories like branded content, like influencer marketing, like social media. Look at those more clearly and try to see if there's a lot of work that you guys do and you can enter within those specialty categories as well. Okay, I don't know how I'm doing on time, Afshin, so we'll just move forward. These are some of the quotes that we got from global jurors, right, on FE cases that they've done, and I thought it pertinent to put it up here. And if you read, almost all of them are talking about linking the sections, strong connections to results, let it flow like a story, integrated picture, all a brilliant insight, beautiful precision of insight measurement. Best cases were simple and powerful. Really pick out the words that you can from each of those quotes, and it's simple. It's coming down to concise and really keeping it very, very easy and simple to read, very flowing in terms of a story, and that's what you need to do with your cases. I think we're all guilty of not spending enough time on a certain case. We usually delegate this to our creative agencies and the strategy sections within those agencies. But it's a team effort, right? We need to do this hand in hand, and we definitely need to vet those cases before they go. So I'm guilty of this as well, and I usually end up not being able to vet each and every case that we send out. And then it's embarrassing when your fellow jurors tell you that they've got some grammar mistakes in it and simple language mistakes. And you don't want that, because that just leaves a bad impression, because you are trying to impress the juror in that meeting room. Your vehicle is that case study. And if it's got simple errors like that, that just comes off as a little bit disrespectful, because every juror over there is volunteering their time to judge these, right? They're not being paid for this. And it's a collective effort to uplift standards within our industry. So we need to give it a little bit of due importance. And that's just a personal plea from my side, that we need to give this more focus. Right. We discussed just a few examples. I won't spend too much time here, but I'll highlight what I liked about some of these cases on the good side, right? One of our previous examples, and we've got permission from these companies to share these examples, is the Amreli Steels one. And what I liked about this case was the fact that they really outlined their objective and their challenge very clearly. And they said, we don't have money, we don't have budgets, we can't do big ATL campaigns like the FMCGs. So we said, okay, we'll play only in the digital world. And within the digital world, we'll try to focus only on our owned assets and things that we can control. So our website, our LinkedIn page, our Facebook page, and those kinds of things. And so they set the context, right? They told us they don't have budget, so they can't do ATL, big emotional campaigns, which by the way, they did, but they didn't air it enough in my view. And then they said, no, okay, we'll play only in the digital realm. Within the digital realm, they very clearly outlined which platforms that they would be focusing on and why. And they gave very specific objectives in terms of what they wanted to achieve, right? So 200% increase in average daily organic reach on Facebook, 200% increase in average daily engaged users on Facebook, 25% increase in official website traffic, 75% OnePlus reach on TV. So they did have a TV campaign with this. 5% increase in sales contribution of territories other than Sindh. And then they go on to say that we chose these because they're easy to measure through platform analytics, media monitoring, and sales figures. So they're telling us that we're not just putting in any wishy-washy objectives, we're putting in things that we can measure, and this is how we're going to measure it. And basically, it was as simple as that, but it made sense. Hot tea stains. I think hot tea stain was again an example of an initiative which was entered into multiple categories. But this one was specifically because they explained their insight very nicely. And they linked the whole insight of the fact that there's in the burns unit where 80% of the burns were happening due to hot beverage falling on kids. And the way they linked it within their campaign was something that they explained very nicely, and the importance of it and why it was so so important to the campaign that they were doing, right, in order to raise awareness. So I think that was explained very beautifully. In the third one, which is Vatika First, I think here the challenge was that they wanted the complementary use of oil to go up along with the shampoos. Here they did a very good job in explaining the context of their target segment, and they knew a lot about their target segment in terms of their preferred usage of products, their preferred usage of media, who they followed and how they went about choosing their products and so on and so forth. And they did that very well, and then later on went on to explain the results and link them back to this this context setting that they had done with the explanation of their target market. So really three strong examples in terms of how they went about certain sections, and maybe the entire case wasn't like really very ironclad, but these parts were, I think, best in class. In terms of cases which had rooms for improvement, we tried to obviously talk more category rather than brand. But there have been, I mean, to be honest, it won't make sense for me to even read these some of these examples out, because basically what happened with these cases is when you read any of their sections, they're very generic, and they don't really leave you with any idea of what they're trying to achieve, what they're trying to measure, what does success look like. None of these things come out very clearly in this. So this becomes like really hard to judge. And it doesn't leave us inspired enough to be able to score highly on them, right? So Let's Advertise Again was, for example, asking print and TV advertisers, I think, to generally start advertising again. I think because of the COVID era, where they were saying if these people start advertising again, then that will help the industry. But reading through, you were not sure what they were trying to achieve and who this was that was trying to do it. Afshin, I don't know if you want to add a little bit of context here, but
yeah. So we have a few things which we kind of stress upon. Is the first most is the category scenario. That's the first question, which kind of sets the tone of the entire form or the case writing. If you kind of go about it right, in the right manner, on the right way, because आपने context build करना है वहाँ पे, you have to set tone for the entire form. You have to tell them about the entire category. For example, if it's about tea, you can actually go about telling them कि कितना percent आपका share है, what is the entire share of the market, and building onto a context. So the first most important thing after the category selection is the building onto the category scenario that sets the tone for the juror, and he keeps on reading it. So the entire form should come like a story. One more tip which we kind of give to them, everyone during our sessions, is that if Adil, for example, is writing a case, Hamza should read the form, because Adil is working in a different industry and Hamza is working in a different industry. So if Hamza is able to grasp his case, that means that he's actually made it so simple and crisp that he's unable to pick out any flaws in the form. तीसरी चीज जो हम बहुत important है is that please remove all kind of subjectivity in your case and form. So once अगर आपका form इतना flawless लगेगा, तो वो चारों parameters पे juror आपको अच्छा ही score देगा. So the one thing which you have to remove is remove any kind of subjectivity when you're writing a case, to make it more authentic or a good piece of case writing. एक चीज जो आदिल, I think maybe you can add to it, is कि एक चीज आपने बहुत अच्छी बताई कि कि any external factors जो affect करते हैं. For example, during COVID, the most factor जो हम account करते थे was the COVID. Because बहुत सारी इंडस्ट्रीज एकदम से बूम हुई थी, सोप हो गई, सैनिटाइजर्स हो गए, ये सारी चीजें एकदम से हुई थी. तो द मोस्ट इम्पोर्टेंट फैक्टर वाज कोविड एट दैट टाइम. So इस तरह के कोई भी फैक्टर्स हो, just chip in all those factors. And एक चीज जो हमें forms when we go through screening, एक चीज जो हम pick करते हैं is the difference between insight and the creative, the big idea. So there's a very fine line between insight, which actually takes you to the big idea then. तो बहुत सारे लोग big idea को ही insight treat कर देते हैं, which is not possible. So if you can just, in a line, probably make it more elaborate on this fact. And I think the rest you've already covered. I don't think so I need to add anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, you put me on the spot because it's very difficult, right? It's not easy to do. And that's why not a lot of cases win or get this right. But finding an insight is really important. And it comes about by doing the hard yards and then talking to consumers. And before that, you've already done the hard work before it as well. So I can maybe rely on a case that I did with my previous company, and that was on Shoop Noodles, and the context was very clear, right? You've got one big player in the market. It's a 80-90% share player. The second biggest player has just left the market, and you are a distant third player. And you see that you've spent already 6 years in the market by trying to copy and do the same thing. So you take a step back and you try and look at the market again with a fresh pair of eyes, and you see that, okay, the biggest competitor is catering a certain segment or a certain age group of the consumers. And you say, okay, is there enough volume in this category which goes around in other segments or not? And you do a sort of a volume mapping, and you actually figure out and see that actually, if you combine two of the older age groups from the ones that the competition is talking to, it roughly makes about the same volume pool as the one that they're catering to. So instead of fighting in the same space, you say, okay, let's try and target the older group where there's similar volume, and go there. But so that's one, let's say, insight that you get out of your analysis. But that's a data insight, right? Now, what do you do with that? So then you go and talk to those people who are part of those segments, and you talk and talk and talk, and you try and come up with what's this one unifying emotion or truth that might link them. And in this case, it was basically preteens and teenagers that you were talking about. And something that came across, whether you spoke to girls, boys, little older teens or younger teens, preteens, and something that came about was a lack of trust, the society, right? So whether it's their parents, their teachers, their friends, each other, themselves, they didn't trust themselves enough to be able to achieve bigger things. And we said, we've got something over there, right? And I'm now just polishing over it. I'm not giving you like the whole shebang of it, but we honed in on this insight of trust, and we said, okay, let's see now, give that to the agency and see what we can come up with. And through a lot of iterations, something that came up with and stuck was trust or must have. And this was building on the previous campaign of kids of all ages. So you wanted it to be an evolution and not like a jarring revolution. And so when we came up with trust or must have as the creative big idea, and then we used that as the main slogan for the campaign as well, a lot of things opened up, and then the execution followed itself, and everything fell into place, and you were like, okay, let's now make this bigger. And then the brand did it the way they did it, right? They could have also taken different directions with it. They could have gone darker with it. They could have gone revolutionary with it. They could have gone humorous with it, and they could have kept it bubblegum and pop and soft, right? Like maybe what they did. So executional manifestations follow the creative idea. The creative idea follows the insight. The insight follows the analysis and the data that you do, which links back to the challenge that you were a third place player in the noodles category, and you wanted to gain share as much as possible because there's only one big player that you can gain from. And obviously other things then fall into it. So if you've come up with newer flavors, newer product formats, and you're asking for trust from the consumers on your brand, so that's also then a double play. And it worked well. And now if I tell you the results, then the share went in a period of 2 years, 3 years from 4 or 5% volume share to 15%, right? And that's then a short case study that I've just told you, linking in the context, the objectives, the insight, and the creative idea. So I hope that that helps, but that's, Afshin, how I would look at it.
Yeah, I think you've covered it pretty well. Yeah.
Cool. So moving on, let's just, I think this is now wrapping up. So I'll just open up these tips. We've already said you need to treat every form as a story, and all the sections should link with each other. One way to do this is to maybe start with an executive summary. I know it's a boring term, and we've used this in our reports, report writing from universities, but that helps because the executive summary captures all the major points, and you can keep coming back to it. Be very clear and concise. Your objectives, target segments, and positioning should be very, very clearly stated in the first section, as we've discussed. Context, context, context. I said it 3 times because we need to build on this and we need to explain it very clearly. Be very honest. I think Afshin said authentic. That's a very important word, and simple. Explain the results, don't just state them. And remember, in the results, visuals are better than text. That's very important. Graphs and bar charts and pie charts help make the form look colorful and gives us a break from reading so much. And you need to tie each of the results back to the objectives, as I mentioned. We mentioned the creative reel and how much time was spent on it. In the FEs, it's very strict in terms of don't make it a repetition of the form. There should be no narrations of the whole case and the business challenge over here. Showcase very clearly the actual different types of creatives that you did in order to bring your idea to life, right? Or your campaign to life. So it should just be that. It should be just the creative reel. Proofread, 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 edit, edit, edit. Give it to Hamza, give it to the marketing head to read again and again, so that they can proofread it. So yeah, those are the tips. And in the end, I promised that I would give you a formula. What makes winning work win? I say that these are the effectiveness awards after all. So results should be actually a big part of your formula. And how will those come in and give you the formula for a good form? So I've put it into right category selection multiplied by honesty, take it to the power of attention to detail on all 4 parts of the form, divided by proofreading and editing, because that's your lowest common denominator. And that will give you a well-written case with a great chance to win. And I don't know this guy, but he said that a good marketeer knows what problems to hone in on and then try and solve them. If you succeed, you get promoted and you win an FE. It's that simple. So I hope you guys enjoyed and learned something from it. Afshin, should I take the questions now or after Hamza's section?
I think you can take your questions now because there are just a few ones.
Yeah.
And then we'll just like,
yeah, let me quickly go. Questions? Yeah, I can quickly go over them. I've got them open over here. Mohsin, yes, it wasn't the bridal child bride campaign. It was something else. So I think you had.
It wasn't the bridal uniform nahi. The bridal uniform one.
And by the way, even if it was that, but it was in a different category, and one of its section did make sense, then yeah, it wouldn't make sense, right? So we can still use it as an example. When explaining results, how important is it to state competition landscape? Very important. So I'm hoping you would have set the competitive landscape already, and the results, if they're important in terms of beating competition and market share, then it's important to set that up. If it wasn't and you're looking at some internal KPIs, then that's also okay, but you need to set the context, right? If in the beginning you said it was an internal business problem that you needed to solve, and in the results you're giving me market share versus competition, then I'll be like, it's a disconnect. So we won't be able to judge properly on that. If on a national level, the results are satisfactory, but on a regional level, activities done around the campaign created a bigger impact, how relevant would it be to build a regional perspective? Very relevant if you've done that in the first section. We're not here to judge whether something was right or wrong, right? We're here to judge whether you've built a strong case according to the problem that you're telling us. We don't know what happened in your category or on your brand or with your campaign. If you said a regional problem was the biggest problem, great, we'll start from there. And then if your results corroborate that, then we'll be like, yeah, okay, effective case, good, let's score it accordingly. So that's I hope that answers that. Okay, Yusera, hi. We've worked together before, so hope you're doing well. She's asking, when it comes to the results, considering the retail audit numbers aren't available. Would internal numbers and percentages still impress the judges, especially if the campaign was released post December 2020? Yes, again, it'll be important in terms of context setting. So give us an alternative objective that you would want to measure and which could act as a proxy. Usually for market share, it can be top of mind. It can be brand used most often. Those are usually good proxies for market share if that's not available. And if you don't want to use any of those, you can still tell us that it's only the sales increase that you're measuring in certain regions and give us those results. So it's not whether one metric impresses us most or not. What will impress us is the strength of the bond and the link that you're creating between whatever KPIs you've put down to the challenge that you've defined. That's what will impress us.
Adil, I'll just add in here. So with relations to retail audit specifically, so we everyone knows that retail audit numbers milenge hi nahi na, because there was a lag jo beech mein especially space aaya tha, and probably we don't have numbers for that. So what you guys can do it as a suggestion is that yes, give us your internal numbers. Give us that kind of authenticity. Yes, we can get it, stamped from our auditors or CFO, and then because it will leave us कि भाई these are open. These guys are open to reliability. Where एक आपने source दे दिए हमें, numbers दे दिए हैं back के हाँ हम stamp करके दे रहे हैं, we're open to it. तो at least वो numbers आ जाएंगे हमारे पास, because your sourcing section में I think that's where she's asking for. Yes, do give us internal numbers if the retail audit numbers are not available.
Cool, thanks for that. So Shariar, I don't understand the comment, sorry. All these strategies fits best for collective type of case studies as well. So I'm not sure if I get that, but if you're saying what we're talking about fits for writing all types of case studies, I would think so, yes. Every case study should read like a story. That's the basic principle. Okay. Do the winners qualify for the global awards, or new applications have to be submitted? New applications have to be submitted. So take it from someone who's also participated in the regional FEs. We have to submit new forms and do them slightly differently. Okay, that's it, I think.
Yeah, guys, we don't have any more questions. So we'll just quickly move on to Hamza. Hamza is going to take us through the case study, and of course he's been on the jury panel. He's going to highlight his points and his comments. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you so much, guys, and thank you so much, Adil, for setting such a good stage. I don't think I'm probably going to sound foolish by repeating most of the things, but I've been given a certain time, so I'm going to try and make it very, very short and precise. As it says that it's time to get efficient, which also is a pun that I feel like it's very important. While we talk about effectiveness, we also have to see that how well we plan this exercise and how much time we give to it. Unfortunately, being at the other side of the fence, I know how we sort of look to this at the very last minute or the last hour, and that's where the crisis comes in. And having written cases for almost 12 to 13 years now, I've realized, like, while Adil had a formula, I only have learned from an experience where the more you hate this exercise, the harder it becomes for you. So I think the first few weeks you just have to sort of understand that this is it. It's that time of the year, and while you have to work on all your other projects and briefs, this is something that's going to come your way, come what may. So let's just try and embrace it and make it a fun experience, because the more you hate it, trust me, the harder it's going to sound and get like. So, and of course, making sure that everything that you're doing and writing is not going beyond a certain, not just time limit in terms of and effectiveness in terms of the output as well. Before I move on to a few tips that I've learned over the years, and of course some of them are as exactly what Adil has mentioned. Sheen was kind enough to ask us to share some of our work, and a very wise person who's also on this call in this session has taught me something which is very important, that no matter how much or how little just make sure that you end up sharing it, so everybody else who's on the other side of the spectrum gets to learn something from that. So this is a piece of work that we've been working on, like Ogilvy and our client partner Telenor. We worked on it very tirelessly and have cooked it for a few years, and we basically saw the results this year, and almost every, in fact not almost every award platform that we've entered in, we've been able to win. So that's a great win for us. The campaign is very simple. It talks about inclusivity. It talks about giving people an identity. It works towards UN sustainable goals, and also it had a very, very real problem and a challenge at hand, which was resolved by a very simple tech solution. We're in a country which is quite populous, and despite that, almost 60 million people in the country, in Pakistan, at the time of the launch of this campaign, were invisible to the state, which is quite an alarming reality. But you might be a citizen living in the country but not having an identity meant that you were basically invisible to the state. You were devoid of the benefits that you could get otherwise. And the key simple takeaway of this very alarming insight was that technology reaches every nook and cranny or the corner of this country. Like, you may not be able to have access to those areas, but technology does, which is why we were able to empower almost 426 villages over the country to register children and their births, which were basically manually registered otherwise. So, and today we can proudly claim that we've been able to register almost 1.4 million children. So, and out of 50% of those were just girls. So it's quite a phenomenal achievement on our part. I'm going to quickly show you what happened, what the case film looks like. But again, like Afshin and Adil mentioned, that case film is just one part of your process. Do not focus on it. There are other award entries that are focusing more on the case film. FFEs particularly talks about effectiveness. Here, what you write is what it's more important than what you show. So I mean, don't get your judgment shouldn't be clouded by the fact that there are so many so and forth case studies that you see, or show reels or films that you see, and it's quite impressive. If you have time, of course, put that, invest in it. But if you don't, then just focus on your farm, and that's what the primary focus should be like.
A birth certificate. Everyone has one, right? Wrong. For more than 60 million unregistered children in Pakistan, it means a lifetime without access to medical care, social security, public schooling, or protection from underage marriage and child labor. The problem of low birth registration rates is due to social and economic factors. In many areas, it's nearly impossible, especially for children born at home, in remote locations, or in displacement. To improve access, we worked with Telenor, Pakistan's second largest mobile network, and developed the Digital Birth Registration Initiative. The simple Android-based application receives and reports birth counts by authorized community leaders, health workers, and medical staff. In addition, a few basic pieces of information like identity of parents, address, and phone number being documented. Submitted birth registration data is then reviewed and approved by authorized government officials, which creates a legal path to a birth certificate. Making over 1.2 million children visible across 426 rural villages in Pakistan, providing them the most basic of human rights, a future.
I hope it was audible and you could hear it, but that's what the initiative looked like. So I'm going to dissect this with, like while Adil used a formula, I'm going to say this is a framework, and we used it to sort of send this particular case for not just FE Pakistan, but also FE APAC. And, it sort of proved in our favor. Every thing that you write in your case must demonstrate a clear causality between the work and the ultimate business impact. We've known that it's a given, of course. This is a fundamental requirement for writing an effective case for an effective FE case. Now, if you call it like the BBC model, which is called business, brand, and comms. So for your business goals, like for example, if you have to achieve an X percentage achieve X sales growth number and or a share price, etc., typically which involves a percentage or a dollar value or a price point, you say, how do you do it? Like you do it by how many what percentage will you be able to achieve, and by increasing the penetration or usage, the frequency spent per transaction. And this involves a clear behavioral shift. Now that behavioral shift is going to reflect on the brand. What is that attitudinal shift required to achieve the above behavior that you've identified? It could be related to the perceptions towards the product or the brand. Now, the particular case that I'm talking about, we did not have a business objective with that. We were looking for an attitudinal shift or a move in terms of the brand preference or consideration. We were not looking to sell a particular product here. We were looking, so you don't necessarily have to fit all of these in. This is where your objective setting exercise becomes the most cardinal principle of writing an effective case, where you link all of it. People often confuse that, if there's no business objective, then that means that case is going to be ineffective. That does not mean that objective is weaker. I mean, you could have a brand-based objective, or you could have a communications-based objective. And having seen and written so many cases, I understand this is a part which becomes one of the most biggest problems, because you end up justifying all of this when you talk about the results. So when you've stated a business goal, which is also sort of retrofitted, backworked, and backlinked, then you also start giving evidence for how it proved, and all of that might not be relevant to your case. So hence, it's very important to have a fewer number of objectives that you can at least claim and say that you were able to achieve a certain results about it. Similarly, when your brand goal has been identified, that it was either about perceptions of the product, or it was a broader category issue in that particular area, then that will effectively reflect on your comms as well. What are the specific communication objectives to achieve in terms of reach, engagement, and messaging? Here you include clear KPIs. Like, it's very important for you to have a certain growth from X to Y. You have to state it. Otherwise, a number a quantum number or a qualitative number is going to be ineffective if you do not show the relativity of it. It's as simple as that. If you say that this person is, or an artwork that you make and say this is a great artwork, but how will you judge it without having to look at a benchmark for it, right? This is better than that. Hence, it's very important to have that meaningful benchmark to it. And if you use this framework, it becomes a lot more fluid, a lot more effective, it makes a lot more rational sense, and your results are effectively then proving what your actual goal was. So I think this is the kind of area where you need to maybe sit down with your clients, the brand teams, and understand that what your goal is. And you may not necessarily have all goals fitted in that particular section. It might have a business objective, might have a brand objective, or just a communication objective. You don't necessarily have to have all of them in it. Then lastly, like if I recap some of the key areas and some of the key learnings that I feel that basically should go into that form, that beyond just your blood and sweat and all the efforts and the sleepless nights that go into it eventually at the last minute. You have to understand that this is a form which is holistically being scored. Each question, each section has a certain point. Well, you have to ensure that each score, you have to score well in all 4 sections. You can't just so there are weightages attached to it. For that matter, if the category scenario is weakly written and your results are very astounding, and of course your execution is great, then that weak area is going to reflect in your overall output. So you have to ensure that all 4 sections are sort of divided in a manner that each section makes you score well which is why you actually end up getting the weightage right. Then things didn't just happen, they happened as a result of a deliberate intent. This is very evident, like when we're reading a case and when we're also writing it, it's harder to sort of backwork and backlink things, but when you're reading it, you actually spot it very clearly. You understand what something was backworked, and it actually makes a lot of, it raises a lot of question marks. So when you say that this happened with a deliberate intent, you know that, how are you going to evaluate it? How are you going to see it outcome, or how are you going to see its manifestation? Which is what is very important. If there is no deliberate intent, like आपने कुछ अगर कर भी दिया है, आपने if you executed something and it does not make any holistic sense of why you're doing it, and there's no efficiency trap in that, then there's no point in writing that case. Here you also have to sort of maybe list down which effective parameters are important enough in that campaign. Now, may not be a very, very big, powerful campaign, but it's a very small business objective that you've achieved, or a brand objective that you achieved. It could also be entered into, to prove that it may not have been an ATL campaign like Adil mentioned, but it could have been a very small initiative that helps you sort of stand out. So you must look at that deliberate intent and see why things happened, and as a result of it, of course, how it makes sense to the entire in the entire story. Then every objective has it's a very simple thing to say, every objective has a result and every result must have an objective, but it's also very important because when you look at all the results, when we're evaluating, all the results are actually sort of appended below the objectives that we've stated in our forms. So it's very clear for us to see, okay, what results are actually extra, and that this is an exercise I recently conducted with the region as well, and we sort of understood the value of putting in the best possible results. I mean, that does not mean that you fit in everything. If a campaign requires you to, I remember one of the campaigns that we worked on where the result was just one result which mattered to the entire effectiveness of the campaign. So the secondary parameters were very irrelevant. They did not mean anything to that case. So that does not mean that you fill that up with a lot many results. If your objective is being justified by a single result or a number of results, then make sure that they're just to the point. Additional results will there will be additional results. Those are not going to benefit you in that particular case. If the main result is not corroborating, or if it's not effective in that manner. Always think before writing that case. The creative must have put in a lot of effort. The brand team must feel it's, the compelling nature of it, or anybody who's worked so hard on anything that they would feel that they would try to enter it into an award or something. But ask this question to yourself only, like, why would this be a winner? Will this, is this something that you wish you had done? Is this something that, somebody watching it or seeing it or reading it would say that they wish they had done it? That's where you actually stand out. I mean, that's where the creative execution or the creative hook in that and that idea, that's how it stands out. And that's how you really clearly differentiate that not every campaign that you worked on needs to be submitted for an FE case, because the winning ideas are always standing, like they're a class apart, they're in a separate section, they're in a separate folder. You've got to sort of look for them. Not everything that you've been cooking all year round needs to be put into the oven and say, okay, fine, this is a case and we'll send it just for the sake of it. So you always, and it's always great to ask these questions amongst yourselves, amongst your peers, maybe creative strategy team, another team, an account management team, would probably anybody who's worked on it, or somebody who's probably not even worked on it, thinking, how can you get that third party perspective or that opinion if this is something that is so compelling? And they will be very honest to you, of course, and that feedback will never be harsh, of course, if you truly believe in it for the better. Lastly, this is what David Ogilvy is also talked about in his cardinal principles of how to write effectively. Please write with your heart. Don't make it into a business presentation that you're probably giving to Adil in a boardroom. write like you're selling something like you do, you know, this is an IMC, of course, like treat it like that. This is an IMC and each section is a part of, and then, you know, that IMC section, that section 1, 2, 3, 4 are different parts of that IMC, right? So the way you sell it, sell your ideas in a boardroom, that's how you sell your thought here, and that's how you sell your, writing abilities. So write with your heart, the way you talk, literally just write like that. I mean, you don't have to use big difficult words. Like when we are talking, we don't generally use a lot of jargon and a lot of difficult words. We tend to do that when we're in a different industry or a different particular, but talk like you're write like you're talking, and use shorter words, shorter sentences. I mean, there was a question when in the poll that how much time does a juror actually spend on a case when they're evaluating in a day. You'd want to pull your hair out, and I'm going to leave that to Afshin, and she's going to answer that question. I'm not, because there's only so much that you can evaluate in that time, of course. So it's unfair that you've put in so much effort, and that content basically sort of zones out the judge who's reading it. He's trying to look for information, but of course, the more you try to dig into it, and the more the more harder it is going to be for the juror. So unfortunately, you've got to make it easier for them, which is why when you make it simple, you're more effective. So these are the 4 or 5 areas that I would personally recommend and advise on, of course, and that's how you end up winning. Well, in terms of a formula, I would say I would completely negate Adil and say there is no formula. Just write with your heart, and trust me, you'll be able to you'll be able to compel someone or the other, of course. There are certain do's and don'ts, and those parameters need to be looked into. But the first and the foremost thing is that you write sincerely, and don't be too scared from this exercise. A lot of people I know, I mean, wait, how many? There were 58 participants in the beginning. Now we have 46, but those 40 or 45 odd people, at least on a Monday at almost 6 p.m. are still interested, which means that they're sort of hoping to put their best into this writing exercise and want to learn. So all the best to everybody. And of course, I think I've seen, and the entire FE team is always available for any questions that you may have. And of course, if you want to route them to us, we'll be more than happy to answer. This is I understand this is a time where everything, like sort of the brands are also sort of working towards ending the year. There's a lot going on, and then FE comes in with their forms that you have to sort of work your schedules around. But make it a fun exercise, and I'm sure it's going to be an interesting one, and not something that you regret later. That's pretty much it from my end. Of course, if there's any questions, I'd love to take them. I hope I have finished well within the time that I was given.
Yes, in fact.
I put a stopwatch right in front
Stopwatch
of me.
lagaya tha.
Yeah.
Guys, if you have any questions for Adil or Hamza, please raise your hand, or you can unmute yourself and ask them the question yourself.
Oh yeah, so I'm glad Adil has actually already answered a question about the results. So it is actually this. So like I mentioned, this case was probably written and of course we had sent in to a lot of other award entries. So this is not just exactly what we've written for the FE submission, but it's not supposed to look like a visual presentation of your entire write-up. It's not supposed to be like a show reel, which is basically another campaign of sorts about your campaign. For FE evaluation, if the bare minimum is to show execution of each touch point that you've highlighted in terms of the execution in your work, and if you've done that you've already shown a checklist. So do not get overwhelmed by any of the fancier sort of good put together show reels, or don't go for animation unnecessarily. Yes, those are add-ons. They affect a juror's judgment, but do it only if you have time for it, because the main focus, it needs to be on your case, on your write-up, on your form. And that's what is the primary driver of how well you score in a particular entry or a particular category.
Yeah, so I'll just add on to what you were saying, Hamza, that the forms and the show reel, they should complement each other. So in a lot of cases क्या होता है कि forms marketing department लिख रहा होता है or the brand side, show reel agency को दे दी जाती है. So it happens in a lot of cases, and you can actually pick out because they don't gel together. So it's very necessary that, you know, the brand team sits with the agency and they exactly know what to highlight in the show reel as well. So the show reel and the form should complement each other rather than because वो उसको fancy बनाने के लिए they have their own kind of, you know, voiceover and dubbing over it, which doesn't. We have got like example of beautifully written forms and show reels which don't complement them. And then there were forms which were poorly written, and we had to, you know, the juror had to see the show reel, and the show reel was, you know, didn't match the form at all. So, you know, they have to complement each other. I think that's what I would just add from Effie's team on the show reel. Thank you, Adil, and thank you, Hamza, for taking out time and, you know, giving them tips, because these small tips or these small experiences actually add so much value to people who are writing cases. Hum Effie, you know, we've been handling Effie for past, this is only the fourth year, and before that, PAS awards also. But, you know, with every year, we also learn something new from, you know, either the jurors or, you know, from the entrants or even from Effie Worldwide. We've there's a little change in the form. So just to highlight, जहाँ पे objective setting आती है, तो आप लोगों की, you know, थोड़ी सी help करने के लिए, you know, Effie Worldwide has given a list of objectives. So what Hamza was trying to say, it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to come with 6 objectives, you know. जरूरी नहीं है कि एक campaign होगी जो 6 objectives आपकी fulfill कर रही होगी, और अगर वो 6 fulfill कर रही है तो हो सकता है आपका case dilute हो जाए that way. So, you know, you have to be really careful in highlighting कि किस category में मेरे कौन से objectives fit होते हैं. For product service में it could be different, and for, you know, media innovation it could be different, and you're going to tweak your case accordingly to the definition of that category specific. That's all from Team Effie's. We are available on our office address as well as through email and our office numbers, and you all have my and my team, entire team numbers with you. Thank you so much, Adil and Hamza, again for taking out time, you know, sitting with me and, you know, going through the content. And I've been on your, I think, back all the time to, you know, sort out things, but you've been really wonderful and dear friends. I hope it was an insightful session for you all too. And do let us know. Mariam, can we have a quick poll and see, did they learn something from the session or not?
अब लोग भी कम रह गए तो अच्छा बोला
We can't at this point in time.
अच्छा, okay. ठीक है, चलो.
Send it away. Maybe do a LinkedIn post on it.
We can do a post. Yeah.
But thank you so much, Sheen, for arranging this and hosting this. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, and we are going to and Hamza, keep winning, bringing in more Effies and Khans and what else? D&D to Pakistan. We're really proud of you all, and thank you, Adil, for your support always. You've been a real supporter of and our brand ambassador. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.